You're listening to Reverie True Crime, your gateway to the darkest corners of human nature, where we expose the hidden truths of human depravity. These harrowing stories serve as a sobering reminder to keep our senses keen and our awareness sharp, for predators lurk in unexpected places, patiently waiting and observing. Join us as we unravel mysteries, explore motives, and seek justice for victims as we bring awareness to these cases. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. When we closed out Part 4, the official story written and altered about Crystal's death was crumbling to dust. The coroner's report had errors scattered all throughout it, like forgetting to mention Crystal's previous suicide attempt, incorrectly claiming she suffered from atrial fibrillation, and listing outrageous medical conditions like diabetes, diarrhea, pneumonia, and seizures, none of which were true, and all easily disproven through her medical records. Page 3 of the report was pretty alarming. The address listed for Deputy Chuck Harris, the officer who found Crystal, was suspiciously off by a single number, placing him as if he lived next door to Tony and Crystal, when in reality he lived further away. And though Coroner Lewis Carter claimed no bullet had been recovered, the police report contradicted him, suggesting the bullet had been found while Carter was still on the scene. But Jana knew the truth. She had been there. She had waited until her sister's body was carried out at 5:42 p.m., and the timeline told a different story. A story where key evidence happened to pop up after the crime scene had been left completely unsecured overnight. By late May 2023, more pieces fell into place. Jana received the firearms analysis report that she had requested, but oddly enough, it didn't come from the lab, but from the sheriff's office, days after she first asked for it. The timing might have been a coincidence, but it seems as if someone from the crime lab told the sheriff's office that she had asked for the report. The report's dates proved that the evidence Sheriff Matthews claimed was being tested back in February hadn't even been turned over for testing until March, just 2 days before Jana's scheduled meeting with the district attorney. Nothing was making sense. In the last part of this series, we will find out even more about what they tried so hard to cover and where things stand today. Let's get into it. A document stated that testing on the firearm began on May 8, 2023, and ended on May 18th, right in the window of time when Jana had made her request to the crime lab. Was this testing really, quote, in process back in February when Sheriff Matthews sat across from her and Dane and said, quote, "We're doing things with the firearm right now that you don't have any knowledge of. We're having that firearm tested and doing some comparisons," end quote. But the firearms analysis report stated clearly that on March 27, 2023, a full 32 days after Matthews made that statement, the firearm was just being received by Donna Stansberry from Detective Alan Irby. The testing didn't even begin until early May. Even more suspicious, the firearm was not sent for testing until 5 days after Jana and Dane scheduled a face-to-face meeting with District Attorney Penny Ducier. It was impossible to deny. Evidence wasn't being processed in real time. Every move seemed to be a reaction, as if officials were waiting to see how much Jana and her family could find out on their own before deciding what to test, when, and why. Sometimes it's not just what's said in a report, It's what's carefully left out. When Jana finally sat down with the firearms analysis report in her hands, she combed through every line, every piece of fine print. At the very bottom, in faint type, she found a disclaimer. Quote, "Evidence descriptions displayed in brackets are agency provided." The word evidence was even misspelled, another little detail that really didn't inspire confidence. The report listed 4 total items, but the core ones were Item 01, one sealed box containing a 9mm Ruger pistol, noted in brackets as from the Jones residence. Item 03, one sealed plastic bag containing a bullet with bracketed information stating it came from the wall behind the bed of the Joneses' home. But it was item 02 that gave Jana pause. The item was described as, quote, one sealed plastic bag containing one fired 9mm cartridge case, in brackets, WCSO number 1A. That's it. No mention of where the casing was, no address, no date saying when it was found, not even a confirmation that this was the casing Tony claimed to find a week after Crystal's death, the one that raised the first real alarm bell for Jana and her family. How could every other item include a specific location, like Crystal's bedroom, the wall behind the bed, even their home address, and yet this shell casing, the one that sparked their earliest doubts, was listed with nothing but a vague internal reference code? WCSO number 1A meant almost nothing without context. Was it the same casing? Why wasn't the actual discovery location, like the vanity, the makeup stand, the bedroom floor, listed as it was for the bullet and the gun? Was it an omission or an intentional effort to blur the lines? Back on February 16th, 2023, Tony told investigators he found the shell casing inside the home, a full week after the scene had been cleaned and her body removed. That alone should have made it one of the most scrutinized pieces of evidence. Instead, it had the least amount of detail. Jana had seen enough by now to know that sometimes the silence around the evidence is louder than the evidence itself. December 25th, 2023. Most people were with family that day. Some were celebrating, some grieving quietly. For Jana, it was a mix of both. But during the holiday, she reached out to Dr. Frank Peretti, the man who had performed Crystal's autopsy. She had questions about the inconsistencies, about the medical findings that didn't line up with Crystal's medical history, about the descriptions in the autopsy report that didn't even match her sister's body. There were too many unanswered questions that were and still are overwhelming. And Jana needed to hear directly from the man who signed off on so much of what this investigation was grounded in. That day, she emailed Dr. Frank Peretti, respectfully pointing out many errors in Crystal's autopsy report, including the wrong spelling of her name, incorrect descriptions of her hair and eye color, no acknowledgement of her past spinal fractures, failure to note her full hysterectomy, and concerning bruises and injuries she and Julie saw and took pictures of. Jana made it clear with supporting photos and records and asked for clarification to ensure no mix-up happened since Crystal had been cremated. We're going to go through the emails between Jana and Dr. Peretti up until 2025, and then we'll backtrack to separate information from 2024 and 2023. December 26, 2023, Dr. Peretti's office, through someone named Michelle, responded, saying they were looking into the matter and would get back with her soon. 2 days later, Jana politely checked back in, and Dr. Peretti finally got back to her with corrections. He acknowledged the name and hair color were wrong. He said eye color can change after death. He claimed no old fractures were seen because they typically examine the anterior vertebrae only, unless informed otherwise beforehand. He corrected the report to reflect that Crystal had a hysterectomy. He insisted there was no bruising noted on her thighs or wrist at autopsy, explaining what they saw could have been postmortem lividity. He said no fingernail was missing during her autopsy, suggesting it may have been lost later. He also sent her the corrected autopsy report. Jana acknowledged his response, but she also let him know that she had crime scene photos showing the missing fingernail and bruising that developed later during funeral preparation. January 1st, 2024. Jana shared the correct report with other contacts, commenting on how surprising it was that so many corrections were even needed. January 23rd, 2024, she emailed Dr. Peretti again after reviewing autopsy photos, asking about a yellow bag-like object with blue tape visible in one photo, wondering if Crystal's hands had been bagged. The next day, Dr. Peretti responded bluntly, hands were not bagged. March 12th through the 18th of 2024, Jana reached out again, asking if the bedding, like the comforter, sheets, etc., had been collected along with Crystal's body. Dr. Peretti replied that no bedding was received. When Crystal's body arrived at his office, she was wearing a robe and panties, along with a noticeably blood-soiled sheet, which was disposed of. The robe and panties were returned with the body. Jana also asked if the West Carroll Sheriff's Department told him to look for a shell casing. He answered that as a forensic pathologist, he automatically examines for things like shell casings without being told. She clarified that West Carroll Sheriff's Department claimed he had called them on February 15, 2023, to report that no shell casing had been found. Jana wanted to verify whether that conversation ever happened, but Peretti did not confirm whether that conversation ever took place. April 3rd through the 9th of 2024, Jana asked if there was any sketch or diagram that came with Crystal's autopsy report. Dr. Peretti simply replied, no. April 15th, 2024, Jana requested a copy of the invoices and payments related to Crystal's autopsy. Dr. Peretti's office replied that West Carroll Parish Coroner's Office would have those records because they are the official keepers of those documents in Louisiana. December 23rd and 24th of 2024, Jana asked if she could receive a copy of Dr. Peretti's case notes. He declined, saying his case notes are considered work product and all information was included in the autopsy report. January 11th, 2025, she emailed to ask whether any x-rays had been taken during Crystal's autopsy. That message, as of the report, had yet to receive a reply. Back on May 5th, 2024, for Jana, the road to justice had long since left the bounds of Oak Grove. Alongside private investigator Sheila Wasaki, as well as Ray Andriacchio, Pam Cruz, and Sherry Smith, she traveled to Washington, D.C. to speak for Crystal, and for so many others whose cases had been closed too quickly or ignored altogether. Each woman carried the weight of a different name, a different loss, a different injustice. But the mission was the same, to stand up for those who no longer had a voice. They met with lawmakers, shared their stories, and pleaded for systemic change in how suspicious deaths were handled, especially when bias, influence, or indifference had been allowed to create the outcomes. On the very same day that Jana gave her speech to Senator Bill Cassidy's councilman, the Louisiana State Police delivered their answer. A formal letter was issued. They would not be reopening Crystal's case. No new explanation, no offer of support, just a simple dismissal, timed almost poetically to Jana's call for accountability on Capitol Hill. June 17, 2024, in a move that came with no warning, Sheriff Scott Matthews retained legal counsel. In a letter that followed, Matthews' attorney made a single striking statement, quote, "Crystal's case remains open." It was a curious shift. For months, the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Office had been adamant that Crystal's case was closed and that no further investigation was necessary. The Louisiana State Police had said the same. But now, after national attention had begun to build, after Jana visited Washington, after they started to feel a little public pressure, they wanted to keep the file open, possibly to avoid more scrutiny, perhaps so they wouldn't have to admit their faults. November 25th, 2024, over a year after Crystal's death, the story finally aired on KNOE, a local Louisiana news station. The segment put a spotlight on Crystal's case, hitting all the points about the inconsistencies, the questions, and the family's persistent calls for transparency. It featured voices from the people who had walked every step of the way: Jana, private investigators, and loved ones who refused to accept the silence and dismissiveness as an answer. The community heard it. Strangers heard it. Crystal's name was out there. Her story was finally out there in a big way. Despite months of asking questions, pushing for answers, and collecting their own evidence, Crystal's family continued to hear the same old thing from officials in West Carroll Parish. Quote, "There's nothing suspicious. Everything matches. This case is closed." In so many ways, the sheriff's department, the coroner's office, and others were asking the family to stop asking questions. But Jana had made a promise to her sister that she will always keep. On August 11, 2023, after contacting the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, Jana submitted a public records request concerning Tony Jones's employment. The request was simple. Was Tony employed at Forest High School, and if so, how was this permitted, given that his teaching license had been revoked? The response came from West Carroll Parish Superintendent Christy Boyd, confirming not only his employment, but that he had been allowed to continue working despite the revoked license. This added another thread to a growing pattern. Rules were bent for Tony Jones, and no one seemed willing to hold him accountable. But the real weight of conflict of interest came not through paperwork, but through something much more visible and impossible to ignore: Facebook. Jana had long wondered how deep Tony's ties ran with the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department. Now she had evidence that those ties weren't just professional, they were personal. On September 25, 2019, Crystal had once posted a photo of Tony in a West Carroll Sheriff's Department uniform, showing how long he had been associated with the office. February 13th and 17th of 2023, just days after Crystal's death, Tony made many public Facebook posts, grieving, yes, but also defensive. On each one, Heather Hill Irby, the wife of Chief Investigator Alan Irby, could be seen interacting with heart reactions and comments. On March 10th, 2023, just 1 month after Crystal's death, Tony updated his profile picture. He removed the photo of himself with Crystal and replaced it with a photo of just himself. The change might have gone unnoticed, but what stood out to Crystal's family was the familiar name reacting to it, Heather Hill Irby. She gave it a like, the wife of the very man tasked with helping lead the investigation into Crystal's death. A few days later, after expressing to Sheriff Matthews that they feared Tony would flee, Tony wrote a Facebook post that said, quote, "Just a PSA if anyone has any questions about what has went on or if I'm leaving town, please feel free to contact me and I will answer any questions that you have. Thank you." It seemed like he was being told what was asked in private. A day later, on March 11th, his Facebook profile still showed he was married to Crystal. But by March 19th, just 38 days after her sudden and tragic passing, he quietly changed his relationship status to single. Maybe all of this wasn't seen as a big deal to other people, but in light of everything else, the social media posts, the pattern of defensiveness, the selective information being passed between law enforcement and the family, how could you not be suspicious? On March 17th, 2023, after thinking about Tony's behavior and how he had repeatedly represented himself as law enforcement, Jana decided to check the official West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department website. What she found confirmed her concerns. Tony Jones was still listed as a deputy. The family kept being told that Tony was not employed with the sheriff's office, but he was still listed publicly. He even told Dane that he had known both Sheriff Matthews and Detective Irby for over 20 years, and his public Facebook profile still listed his job title as patrol officer at West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department. If he was no longer employed there, no one in authority had asked him to change it. Detective Irby even told Dane quite a few times that Tony was a, quote, great guy. This long-standing relationship seems to be a conflict of interest, one that the family had always said from the beginning, and one that now could not be denied. On March 18th, Tony made another public post. It was a shared TikTok video with this quote, "When you destroy somebody's life with lies, you better treat it like a loan. Karma will come back to you and collect with interest." The timing was no coincidence. It was the kind of post that is subliminal, meant to send a message. Jana and her family had only shared their concerns with law enforcement through the proper channels. So how was he even aware of it? The answer pointed to someone within the system tipping him off. And for a grieving family already exhausted from stonewalling and discrepancies, it was one more blow. 3 days later, Tony shared another TikTok video on his Facebook. The message in the video read, quote, "Sometimes people need to make you the villain so they can live with what they did to you." For Jana and her family, it was jarring. Not only was the post public, but it didn't read as grief. It didn't read as heartbreak or pain. It read like bitterness. And this was only the beginning. The very next day, Tony shared yet another TikTok video. This time, the message suggested romantic rejection. Quote, "I'm done with mixed signals. If you want me, then show me. I'm not going to waste my time yet again on someone I thought I could build a future with." Who was this post for? Was this a look into his mindset a little over a month after Crystal's death? The family couldn't help but notice. It felt like a breakup post, not something a grieving husband would share. After all, Jana found in the laptop his usernames and passwords to the popular dating websites Plenty of Fish, Match, and eHarmony. A few days later, on March 25th, 2023, Tony made another public Facebook status that said, quote, "In my opinion, some people need to get medication and a life. I'm just saying." This came one day after Crystal's oldest son, Corbin, received what was left of his mother in a damaged box, not properly or legally mailed, and without any documentation. Now, let's take a little peek into Crystal's life. Crystal was private in many ways, but her digital footprint told a story. On February 16th, 2022, nearly 1 year to the day before her death, Crystal searched for something surprising. Semicolon tattoo. For someone who had never liked tattoos, who had always sworn them off, this wasn't just about body art. The semicolon is a symbol deeply rooted in mental health survival, representing the choice to continue a sentence when it could have ended. A quiet nod to surviving, to choosing life again and again. As someone with that tattoo myself, I understand that she wanted to live and not choose death. On March 28th, 2022, Crystal's next searches were telling in another way. She wanted to know, quote, "Do teenage girls require a father's discipline to thrive? And is it best for a mom or dad to discipline teenage daughters?" Raising Hannah Cheyenne, Tony's biological daughter from a previous relationship, came with constant pushback. Crystal was the one left to set the rules and boundaries, to be the disciplinarian, while Tony deflected or defended. On December 14th, 2022, she took a screenshot on this date that showed something even more painful. Tony's cell phone location was pinged at the Preferred Inn in Bastrop, Louisiana, while Crystal was actively on a phone call. The location, the timing, the openness of it felt like he wasn't even trying to hide anymore. On January 28th, 2023, Crystal sent Tony a sweet little update of a photo of Hannah getting her driving permit. But it wasn't long before the conversation turned into a dispute. Tony had once again put Crystal in a tough position, this time between Hannah and her biological mother, Holly. Holly had long been absent, unreliable, and emotionally harmful, but now Crystal was being accused of, quote, "trying to take her place." I know it's shocking, but Tony didn't defend his wife. He let Crystal take the heat again. And what happened after Crystal died was even more telling. Just 9 days after her death, Hannah had a brand new Facebook page. She was suddenly reunited online with her mother Holly and even Holly's sister Tanya, who had been convicted in the death of her own child. Tony? He added them too. He wasn't just reconnecting, he was slipping right into a new kind of social life, one that Crystal had tried her damnedest to protect Hannah from. They were bonding over jokes and public posts as if none of the grief, the trauma, the questions had ever happened. At one time, Crystal wasn't in the way of Tony's life. She was his life, until she became inconvenient to it. And that change, which we have gotten glimpses of in search histories, social media connections, and digital timestamps, the big picture deserves to be seen, not just as a list of red flags, but as the final months of a woman screaming quietly to be heard. On January 17th, 2023, Crystal's heart was full the month before her death. Her oldest son, Corbin, had just shared the news that he and his fiancée were expecting a baby. Crystal was going to be a grandmother for the first time, and the joy in her message to Jana radiated through every word. But that joy didn't seem to be shared by the person who should have celebrated right beside her. Tony's response, according to what Crystal told their sister-in-law Julie, was nothing short of dismissive. Quote, "Just great. That's an added expense when we have to go to New York to see the baby." This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was simply part of a larger pattern, one that Julie would later speak about directly to Sheriff Scott Matthews during their meeting. Crystal was experiencing emotional abuse, the kind that attempts to slowly chip away at someone's soul. But even still, she pressed on. On January 28, 2023, Crystal took a screenshot of something she was super proud of. A 96% on one of her education courses. She had also received a certificate of completion, a milestone in her journey to go back to work as an insurance agent. She was returning stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. That same day, she saved a quote that was filled with hope and perspective. The words gave the impression of someone with a future in mind, not someone preparing to leave one behind. On January 29, 2023, Crystal spent this day doing something that brought her peace: organizing. Photos she took show cabinets stocked and sorted, groceries placed just so. Neatness and organization brought her so much joy. It gave her a sense of control in a world that so often felt totally unpredictable. And it wasn't just about the physical space. It was about emotional stability, about making her own calm in the storm. On February 1st, 2023, Crystal received another email. She had officially completed her education course. She was on track, doing the work, and taking steps towards taking back her independence, becoming more certified, more empowered, more ready. Crystal was building a life, not ending one. All of this, the texts, their certificates, the groceries, the excitement about becoming a grandmother, tells the story of a woman who was looking ahead. A woman who was doing the hard work to rise above any hardships she experienced. Now let's get into some current updates. On February 21st, 2025, Jana filed a formal complaint with the Arkansas Board of Medical Examiners against Dr. Frank Peretti, the pathologist who performed Crystal's autopsy. The complaint detailed multiple errors and inconsistencies in his report. That same day, complaints were also submitted to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and the Arkansas Attorney General's Office, calling for further review of Dr. Peretti's conduct and conclusions. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the Arkansas Attorney General's Office in response to the complaint filed against Dr. Peretti. It marked the beginning of a formal review process that the family hoped would finally hold someone accountable for the mishandling of Crystal's autopsy. However, it states, quote, "Thank you for contacting the Arkansas Attorney General's Office regarding Dr. Frank Peretti. The situation you describe in your complaint falls outside the Consumer Protection Division's role and authority. We are not able to facilitate a resolution of your complaint. You may wish to reach out to the Arkansas State Medical Board for possible assistance or information. You may wish to contact a private attorney to discuss your legal rights and options in this matter. A list of Arkansas attorneys can be searched by city, county, and area of practice via the Arkansas Bar Association's website. For civil matters and depending on your income, you may qualify for assistance from Arkansas Legal Partnership. We regret that we have been unable to assist you. However, if we can be of service to you in the future, please do not hesitate to contact us." On February 27th, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division responded to the complaint submitted. Under what we did, it says, team members from the Civil Rights Division reviewed the information you submitted. Based on this information, our team determined that the situation you described does not appear to be within the jurisdiction of the federal civil rights laws we enforce. For that reason, and in the exercise of our enforcement discretion, the Division will take no further action regarding our correspondence. Even when the Division has jurisdiction over a particular matter, it is within the Division's discretion to determine whether to pursue a particular matter for various reasons, including the availability of evidence, among other considerations. What you can do. Your issue may be covered by other federal, state, or local laws that we do not have the authority to enforce. We are not determining that your report lacks merit. Your state bar association or local legal aid office may be able to help with your issue, even though the Department of Justice cannot. Thank you for taking the time to contact the Department of Justice about your concerns. We regret that we are not able to provide more help on this matter. On April 5th, 2025, Jana received a response from the National Association of Medical Examiners regarding the complaint that she had submitted against Dr. Frank Peretti. The response reads, "This letter is regarding your ethics claim received by the National Association of Medical Examiners. Without a determination of the merits of the claim, it is clear the information you relate in your note to the National Association of Medical Examiners Ethics Committee created distress and anguish over the events themselves and the investigation/reporting process. We express our condolences and share in some of this frustration. The Ethics Committee is bound to operate under the Association's bylaws, specifically Article 10, and the associated policy and procedures rules. The information you sent in was provided to the committee and formally discussed electronically March 24th, 2025 to March 31st, 2025. The first requirement is for the committee to determine if there is a jurisdiction over the individual and the issues under the bylaws, and second, if there is probable cause to believe the complaint is well-founded. In summary, the alleged conduct included claims that the subject of the complaint, as outlined under the NAME bylaws, Section 10, Section 1, paragraphs A, B, and C, did not, quote, refrain from exercising professional or personal conduct adverse to the best interest and purposes of the association or to the medical examiner profession, end quote, did, quote, materially misrepresent his or her educational training, experience, area of expertise, certification, membership status within the association, or official title or position in a medical legal system, and did not, quote, refrain from providing any material misrepresentation of data upon which an expert opinion or conclusion is based, end quote. After the deliberations and voting by electronic means with a quorum responding, the committee determined that the complaint is not well-founded, and it will therefore be dismissed. The committee ruled that the complaint reflects poorly on the office processes, perhaps better addressed by the medical board, but certainly outside of our authority under the bylaws, or the issues do not rise to the level of an ethical violation. The committee does not re-investigate cases nor insert itself into the associated medical decision-making. The issues in the claim are more related to whether an individual office has appropriate policies and sufficient procedures in place in an attempt to reduce these errors. Error may occur, and when they do, it is certainly alarming. But an error in and of itself is not an ethics violation nor a misrepresentation. On April 14, 2025, a long-awaited response from the Arkansas State Medical Board arrived regarding the complaint against Dr. Peretti. Buried within these materials were page 8 and 9, copies of the original police report that Dane and Jana had been denied in their March 2023 meeting with District Attorney Penny Doucier. It was a moment both validating and heartbreaking. After being told they couldn't have it, the truth had found its way to them after all. After months of unanswered questions and relentless searching for the truth, Jana finally heard back from the Arkansas State Medical Board. Jana was holding on to a little hope that someone, anyone, would simply acknowledge the mistakes made during Crystal's autopsy. The board's letter carried a heavy and familiar sting of disappointment. They had reviewed the complaint Jana filed against Dr. Frank Peretti regarding the errors, inconsistencies, and shocking mistakes in Crystal's autopsy report. Page by page, the board outlined their decision. They determined that there was no violation of the Arkansas Medical Practices Act. Therefore, no disciplinary action would be taken against Dr. Peretti. In their words, the autopsy findings, even with the acknowledged spelling errors and factual inaccuracies about Crystal's medical history, did not, in their judgment, amount to gross negligence or incompetence under the law's strict definitions. The board also said that while mistakes might have been made, they believed the errors were not sufficient to warrant action against Dr. Peretti's medical license. They noted that the concerns about the death certificate, how the story was being altered, and the misstatements about Crystal's health history, all the things Jana knew deep in her bones mattered, were not, by their standard, evidence of intentional wrongdoing. In the board's view, these were considered documentation errors, not signs of misconduct. The board's response was clinical and completely detached. It offered no comfort, no real acknowledgement of the grief and injustice Jana and her family had carried since losing Crystal. Another door seemed to close, but Jana knew this was not the end. Her fight was never about tearing someone down. It was about standing up for Crystal, for the truth, and for every family who deserves better. Though the board would not hold Dr. Peretti accountable, Jana held on to what mattered most, that she had honored Crystal's life and memory by refusing to just let it go. April 16th, 2025, more responses arrived, this time from the Arkansas Attorney General's office and even the governor of Arkansas. The family's complaint against the Arkansas State Board of Medical Examiners had reached the highest levels of state leadership. These responses acknowledged the complaint, but whether real accountability will follow remains to be seen. Jana posted these updates with the responses in the Facebook group that she created, Justice for Crystal McCrory Jones. In the comments, she wrote, quote, "And this is the guy who is directing me somewhere else? What kind of professional is this?" It was a screenshot of Marshall Menou. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's Menou. He is pictured with a bag of possibly food and a red Solo cup, no shirt, belly sticking out, just a goofy pose and not something you'd want to post and expect people to take you seriously or think you're professional. It's honestly just tacky. Jana had filed a formal complaint with the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement, urgently raising concerns about the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Office. The department had openly admitted that they had no written policies or procedures for investigating homicides, suicides, or even unattended deaths. When the response finally came, it felt like a gut punch. The commission acknowledged her complaint, but stated that it had no statutory authority to investigate it. Instead, it referred her to the Louisiana State Inspector General and the Attorney General's office. It was a painful realization that the agency responsible for overseeing law enforcement had no power to hold anyone accountable. This is the reality that families all over, just like Crystal's, face. If the institutions created to monitor law enforcement could not or would not step in, then who would? What recourse remained when the systems designed to protect failed at every turn? It wasn't just a bureaucratic response. It was a mirror held up to a broken system. And still, Jana refused to back down. In the midst of relentless setbacks, there were rare but great moments of connection. Conversations that reminded Jana that not everyone was dismissive or indifferent. She had shared so many painful responses, the ones that dismissed her, sent her running in circles, or told her nothing could be done. But on April 22nd, she chose to spotlight something different. The few voices who did listen. Jana wasn't just advocating for Crystal anymore. She was fighting for every family who had been dismissed, for every grieving loved one who deserved real answers. She had reached out to representatives and legislators across both Arkansas and Louisiana, and while most responses led back to dead ends, a few stood out. Louisiana Representative Joy Walters sent a simple but powerful message. I will fight for your family. Courtney Fleming, legislative assistant to Representative Matthew Willard, spent 45 sincere minutes on the phone asking detailed questions about Crystal's case. She promised to read Jana's book about Crystal and look into potential legislation, maybe even a law named in Crystal's honor. In Arkansas, Representative Jeremy Wooldridge's office followed up with a phone call after a Facebook message, assuring Jana they were reaching out to the Public Health and Safety Office. And Representative Ron McNair personally asked her to forward her concerns to his own email. These weren't sweeping solutions, but they were signs that some people were listening, and that still meant something. Then came April 23, 2025. The response from Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders' office hit hard. Though Dr. Frank Peretti was licensed and lived in Arkansas, the office claimed they had no jurisdiction over his actions because he'd been hired in a private capacity to perform Crystal's autopsy in Louisiana. Jana had followed every official path, filed complaints, requested records, pleaded for oversight. But now she was told there was no investigation to be had. Even though Crystal's autopsy had been altered months after her cremation, even though there were 2 case numbers and 2 sets of findings, no one, they said, could be held responsible. The only option left? A private autopsy on someone who had already been cremated. It was another brutal reminder of how the system works, or doesn't. And still, Jana refuses to give up. And finally, something shifted. A door opened. Jana had first traveled to Washington, D.C. to raise her voice. She had shared Crystal's story with anyone who would listen, and now her voice and Crystal's will be heard on a national platform. On May 15th, mark your calendars, just 2 days before what would have been Crystal's 46th birthday, True Crime News will air interviews with Jana on the CW channel. The case will be shared in 2 televised segments, giving Crystal's story the space it always deserved. For the first time in a long time, there was something new in the air. Hope. On April 28th, hope showed up in the form of an unexpected email from the office of Louisiana Senator Royce Duplessis. They wanted to meet. After so many closed doors, impersonal replies, and hollow apologies, this invitation felt like a moment of light. a chance to speak directly to someone in power about Crystal's case. A real opportunity. The meeting was scheduled for May 1st at 11:30 in the morning. It would be a chance to discuss the desperate need for accountability and to say, without any hesitation, that Crystal McCrory Jones deserved better than what she had gotten so far. That families should not have to climb mountains alone just to be heard. For Jana, every call, every email, and every restless night had led to this, and she carried not just her sister's story into that conversation, but the hope and strength of every person who believes Crystal's life mattered. On April 29th, through a third-party public records request, the family obtained the second page of Crystal's toxicology report, something they had never been given before. It changes everything. The report showed that Crystal had two substances, topiramate and diphenhydramine. I'm not sure if I'm saying those correctly. Topiramate, Topiramate, and diphenhydramine, diphenhydramine, at significantly elevated levels in her system. According to NMS Labs, it was the medical examiner's responsibility to interpret those drug levels and explain their significance, but Dr. Frank Peretti never did. The implications were staggering. Based on those levels, Crystal would have likely been too sedated or impaired to even hold and fire a gun as reported. Now armed with this vital information, Jana and her team have asked the Arkansas State Medical Board to reopen the complaint against Dr. Peretti. And the fight for justice continues, with more strength, more support, and more determination than ever before. Crystal's story does not end with the paperwork or the zipped lips from officials. It lives on through everyone who loves her and will not let the truth be buried. No matter how long it takes or how many doors close, her family will keep fighting. Jana wrote a book called Justice Denied, A Sister's Fight for Justice, the true story of Crystal McCrory Jones. And she is working on another book called A World Without Your Story. She describes it as a book about living after part of you has left this world. It will be available soon, and I will definitely include the release of the book in future bonus update episodes. Please do not forget to sign the petition in the show notes to support reopening the investigation into Crystal's death. You'll also see all the links to follow Jana on her social media accounts to stay up to date on any new information regarding Crystal's case, as well as the link to her first book. I'll also be compiling the updates as they come in so I can put together update episodes to keep you all informed on what happens next on this road to truth and justice. Thank you so much for listening to these episodes and sharing them far and wide. It means a lot to all of us, especially Crystal's loved ones. Okay, friends, until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode. As we close out, let us not forget awareness is our greatest defense. In a world that can be dark and grim, vigilance is our beacon of hope. When it comes to the cases we have explored together that have remained unsolved, if you happen to hold a piece of the puzzle, dare to step forward. As author Lois McMaster Bujold once said, "The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is a duty of the living to do so for them." Until we reconvene, my friends, stay vigilant and stay informed.